Kim Tae-ho sat at his desk in the Terran embassy, reading the message that had just arrived. The words on the screen made his stomach drop. He had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 3 years now, but he had never seen anything like this. The message was short and cold. It came from the Council's highest office. They wanted humanity to appear before them. They said humans had broken galactic law. They said humans were too violent. They said humans needed to be punished. Tae-ho pressed a button on his desk. Park, Ji-woo, please come to my office right away. Within minutes, Park Ji-woo walked through the door. He was a tall man with sharp eyes and quick movements. He had been a soldier before becoming Tae-ho's military advisor. His job was to keep track of Earth's military actions and explain them to alien governments. What is it, Ambassador? Ji-woo asked. He could tell something was wrong just by looking at Tae-ho's face. Tae-ho turned his screen around so Ji-woo could read the message. Ji-woo's expression grew darker with each word. They are calling us to trial, Tae-ho said quietly. They say we are too aggressive. They say we break their laws when we defend our colonies. Ji-woo sat down hard in the chair, across from Tae-ho's desk. This is about the Outer Rim, isn't it, the pirate attacks? Tae-ho nodded. 3 months ago, pirates had attacked 3 human colonies in the Outer Rim. The attacks came without warning. Families were killed, homes were destroyed, food supplies were stolen. The pirates thought they could hit human settlements and disappear before anyone could stop them, but they were wrong. Earth's defense fleets moved fast. Within 2 days, human ships arrived at all 3 colonies. They drove off the pirates and helped the survivors. But the humans didn't stop there. They followed the pirates back to their hidden bases. They found 5 pirate strongholds scattered across empty space. The human fleet commanders gave the pirates one chance to surrender. When the pirates refused and started shooting, the human ships destroyed every pirate base completely. No pirates escaped. No pirate ships survived. We saved those colonies, Ji-woo said, his voice getting angry. We protected innocent people. We stopped the pirates from ever attacking anyone again. How is that breaking the law? Tae-ho called for Lee So-min to join them. She was the embassy's expert on alien cultures. Her job was to help humans understand how different species thought and acted. She had studied alien societies for over 10 years. When So-min arrived, Tae-ho showed her the message. She read it twice, then sat back with a worried look. This isn't really about the pirates, she said slowly. The council species don't care about pirates attacking human colonies. They care about what happened after. What do you mean? Tae-ho asked. So-min pulled up files on her datapad. Look at what human ships did after the pirate attacks. They didn't just go home. They stayed to help rebuild the colonies. They brought medical supplies. They brought food. They helped repair damage. That sounds like good behavior to me, Ji-woo said. It is good behavior, So-min agreed. But it scares the council. You see, when pirates attack council colonies, the council species usually don't help much. They might send 1 or 2 ships. They might bring some basic supplies. But mostly they expect the colonists to handle problems themselves. Tae-ho was starting to understand. So when we respond quickly and completely, it makes the council look bad? Exactly, So-min said. But there's more. After we destroyed the pirate bases, what did our ships do? Ji-woo thought for a moment. They found some alien settlements that the pirates had been attacking, small colonies from species that aren't part of the council. Our ships helped them too. So-min nodded. The Beltani colonies, the Kithara settlements, even some Narathi trading posts. Human ships brought them supplies. Human doctors treated their wounded. Human engineers helped repair their defenses. And that's bad? Tae-ho asked. It is to the council, So-min explained. Those species are supposed to be under council protection, but the council barely helps them. The council mostly ignores them unless they have something valuable to trade. When humans show up and actually help these species, it makes the council look like they don't care about their own subjects. Tae-ho felt a cold anger building in his chest. So they want to punish us for doing the right thing? They want to punish us for making them look bad, So-min said. But they'll use legal language to do it. They'll say we used too much force against the pirates. They'll say we interfered with council territory when we helped those small colonies. They'll say we're too aggressive and need to be controlled. Jiwoo stood up and started pacing. What kind of punishment are they talking about? Taeho looked at the message again. They want to restrict us to our home system. No new colonies for 50 years. No military ships outside solar system space. No contact with species that aren't already council members. They want to cage us, Jiwoo said, his voice hard. So Min was reading more files on her datapad. It gets worse. I'm seeing reports from our other embassies. Council species have been talking about humans more and more lately. They don't like how fast we're advancing our technology. They don't like how we make friends with smaller species. They especially don't like how those smaller species are starting to ask for human help instead of council help. Taeho felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about one pirate attack. This was about humanity's place in the galaxy. The council had ruled space for thousands of years. They were used to being in charge. They were used to smaller species obeying them without question. But humans were different. Humans made friends instead of subjects. Humans helped instead of just ruling. Humans shared their technology instead of keeping it secret. And that made the old powers nervous. When do we have to appear before them? Jiwoo asked. 1 week, Taeho said. The trial is set for next week on governance. Governance was the council's capital world. It was an ancient ring world built around a dying star. Thousands of alien species lived there. The council's great chambers were there. It was the center of galactic power. We need to prepare, so many said. This trial will be about more than just the pirate attacks. They're going to try to put all of humanity on trial. Taeho looked at his two advisors. These people had become his friends over the past 3 years. They had worked together to build relationships between humans and aliens. They had tried to show the galaxy that humans could be good neighbors. Now it seemed like all that work might be destroyed by a council that feared change. Then we better make sure we're ready, Taeho said. Call Earth, tell President Yoon what's happening, and start preparing our defense. If the council wants to put humanity on trial, we'll give them a trial they won't forget. The journey to governance took 3 days in the fastest human ship available. Kim Taeho spent most of the trip studying files with Choi Minho, a young legal expert who had joined their team. Minho had spent months learning galactic law, reading thousands of treaties and legal documents. The problem is that galactic law is written by the council, Minho explained as their ship approached the ring world. Every major treaty, every important rule, every legal precedent comes from council decisions. They made the laws to benefit themselves. Taeho looked out the viewport at governance. The ring world was massive, spinning slowly around its ancient star. Cities covered every surface of the ring. Billions of aliens lived there, representing almost every species in the galaxy. But laws are still laws, Taeho said. Even if they wrote them, they still have to follow them. Minho shook his head. That's where you're wrong, Ambassador. When you control the courts and the judges, you can make laws mean whatever you want them to mean. Their ship docked at the diplomatic port. Taeho and his team were met by council guards, tall aliens in formal uniforms. The guards didn't speak. They just pointed the way toward the council chambers. The council chambers were designed to make visitors feel small and powerless. The room was enormous, with a ceiling so high that it disappeared into shadows. Representatives from 847 different species sat in rising rows that formed a great circle. At the bottom of this circle was a single small platform where the accused would stand. Taeho had been in these chambers before for normal diplomatic meetings. But today felt different. Today, the weight of all those alien eyes felt heavy and threatening. Councillor Veltar of the Velthari species stood to begin the proceedings. The Velthari were one of the oldest council races. They were tall and thin with pale blue skin and silver hair. They acted like they were better than everyone else because their civilization was ancient. The council recognizes the case against the human species, Veltar announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. Humanity stands accused of 17 violations of galactic law. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed images from the pirate attacks on human colonies. Tejo watched families running from burning buildings. He saw children crying as their homes were destroyed. The human response to these attacks was excessive and illegal, Veltar continued. Instead of reporting the attacks to proper council, human military forces took matters into their own hands. The display changed to show human warships destroying pirate bases. The images were edited to make the human response look as violent as possible. They didn't show the warnings the humans gave. They didn't show how the pirates fired first. Counselor. Mordith of the Mordani species took over the presentation. The Mordani looked like large insects with hard shells and multiple arms. They were known for being cold and calculating. Human forces completely destroyed 5 pirate installations. Mordith clicked in his harsh voice. This was not justice. This was genocide. The proper response would have been to capture the pirates and turn them over to council courts. Tejo wanted to point out that the pirates had been given chances to surrender. He wanted to explain that the pirates chose to fight rather than be captured, but his legal advisor had warned him to wait for the proper time to speak. The presentation continued with more accusations. The council claimed humans had interfered with alien colonies without permission. They said humans had given advanced technology to primitive species. They said humans had disrupted the natural order of galactic civilization. Then the display showed something that made Tejo angry. It showed human doctors treating wounded Beltani colonists. It showed human engineers helping repair Kithara settlements. It showed human ships bringing food to hungry Norathi families. The council was using human acts of kindness as evidence of wrongdoing. The human pattern of behavior is clear, Veltar said. They refuse to respect established authority. They interfere where they are not wanted. They spread their primitive ideas of equality and democracy to species that are not ready for such concepts. A communication link opened and President Yoon Dahaye appeared as a hologram in the chamber. She was a strong woman in her 50s with intelligent eyes and a confident manner. She had led Earth for 6 years, and her leadership had brought humanity into its golden age of space exploration. Honorable counselors, President Yoon said, her voice calm but firm, I have reviewed the charges against humanity. I must respectfully disagree with your interpretation of our actions. The human government does not get to disagree with council findings, Veltar replied coldly. President Yoon continued as if he hadn't spoken. When pirates attacked our colonies, we did exactly what any responsible government should do. We protected our people. We stopped the attackers. We made sure the attacks couldn't happen again. You exceeded the bounds of reasonable response, Mordith interrupted. We responded exactly as we would want others to respond if our people were in danger, President Yoon said. We acted with honor, with courage, and with justice. The chamber filled with clicking, hissing, and other sounds that Tejo had learned were alien expressions of disagreement and anger. Counselor Zephrun of the Sorak species rose to speak. The Sorak looked like large lizards, with scales and sharp teeth. They were proud warriors, but they had long ago accepted council authority. The human president speaks of honor and justice, Zephrun hissed. But where is the honor in refusing to follow established law? Where is the justice in taking matters into your own hands instead of trusting council wisdom? The same council. Wisdom that allowed these pirates to operate for decades, President Yoon asked. The same wisdom that left small colonies defenseless while you debated proper procedures. The chamber erupted in angry sounds. Many council members stood shouting in their various languages. Tejo could see that President Yoon had hit a sensitive point. High Counselor Velnara, the eldest of all the Velthari, raised her hand for silence. She was ancient even by alien standards, and her authority was absolute. When she spoke, everyone listened. The human president shows exactly the kind of arrogance that has brought us to this point, Velnara said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. Humanity is a young species. You have been in space for less than 2 centuries. You have been part of galactic civilization for less than 50 years. She paused, letting her words sink in. Yet you act as if you know better than species that have been civilized for thousands of years. You act as if your primitive concepts of justice are superior to the wisdom of ages. You act as if the rules that have kept the galaxy peaceful for millennia don't apply to you. President Yoon's hologram flickered as she prepared to respond. But Velnara wasn't finished. This council has seen many young species make similar mistakes. They think their energy and enthusiasm make up for their lack of wisdom. They think their good intentions excuse their bad judgment. But the galaxy is not a place for good intentions. It is a place for order, stability, and respect for authority. The High Counselor's gaze seemed to focus directly on Taeho, even though she was looking at President Yoon's hologram. Humanity will learn to follow galactic law, or humanity will be confined to their home system until they do learn. This is not a punishment. This is an education. Think of it as a chance to mature as a species. The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. She was talking to the leader of humanity like she was scolding a child. The Council offers humanity one final chance, Velnara continued. Accept our guidance. Allow Council advisors to oversee your military and diplomatic actions. Learn proper behavior from your betters. If you do this, the restrictions we impose will be temporary. Taeho felt his hands clench into fists. The High Counselor was offering to turn humanity into a protectorate, a junior species that would need Council permission for every important decision. President Yoon's response was immediate and clear. Humanity rejects Council authority over our internal affairs. We reject restrictions on our right to defend ourselves and help our friends. We will not accept the status of a protected species. The chamber exploded in outrage. Alien voices rose, in anger, demanding immediate punishment for human arrogance. Through it all, High Counselor Velnara sat calmly, as if she had expected this response. Very well, she said when the noise died down. Humanity has chosen the difficult path. Ambassador Kim Taeho, you may now speak for your species. But know that your words will determine whether humanity faces 50 years of restriction or something far worse. All eyes in the chamber turned to Taeho as he stood and walked toward the speaking platform. He could feel the weight of his entire species resting on his shoulders. Kim Taeho walked slowly to the center of the great chamber. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Around him, representatives from nearly 1,000 alien species watched and waited. Some looked curious. Some looked bored. Most looked like they had already decided humanity's fate. The speaking platform was small and plain, designed to make whoever stood on it feel exposed and vulnerable. Above him, rows upon rows of aliens sat in judgment. The ceiling disappeared into darkness, making the chamber feel infinite and oppressive. Taeho had given hundreds of speeches in his career as a diplomat. He had spoken to hostile governments, angry crowds, and skeptical audiences. But he had never felt pressure like this. Every word he spoke would be analyzed by alien minds. Every gesture would be judged by alien standards. In the gallery reserved for observers, Dr. Han Yu-jin watched nervously. She was humanity's top expert on alien biology, and she had come to witness this historic moment. She had known Taeho for years, and she could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful control in his movements. Taeho began with traditional diplomatic courtesy. Honorable counselors, I thank you for this opportunity to address your concerns about humanity's actions. Many of the alien representatives weren't even listening. They were talking among themselves, checking data pads, or simply ignoring the proceedings entirely. It was clear they viewed this as a formality before imposing their judgment. I acknowledge that humanity's response to the pirate attacks was swift and complete, Taeho continued. We destroyed the pirate bases because we believed that was the only way to ensure the safety of innocent people. A few aliens made sounds that Han Yu-jin recognized as alien laughter. They found it amusing that this human thought he could change their minds with simple explanations. But as Taeho continued speaking, something in his tone began to change. The diplomatic politeness was still there, but underneath it was something harder. The Council has expressed concern about the thoroughness of our response, he said. You worry that we were too complete in eliminating the pirate threat. I find this concern interesting. Park Ji-woo, watching from the diplomatic section, recognized the subtle shift in Taeho's voice. He had heard that tone before, during their military briefings about hostile alien governments. It was the sound of controlled anger beginning to surface. You see, when I reviewed the records of previous pirate attacks in this region, I discovered something fascinating, Tejo said, his voice growing slightly sharper. These same pirate groups had been attacking settlements for over 30 years. Dozens of colonies had been raided. Thousands of innocent beings had been killed or enslaved. He paused, letting that information sink in. And in all that time, the council response had been limited. A few patrol ships here and there, some strongly worded warnings. The pirates were treated as a minor nuisance rather than the murderers they were. Some of the alien representatives were starting to pay attention now. They didn't like where this was going. The council calls our response excessive, Tejo continued. But I would ask this. How many more innocents should have died while we followed proper procedures? How many more children should have been enslaved while we filed the correct paperwork? Counselor Veltar stood up. The human ambassador exceeds the bounds of proper diplomatic discourse. Tejo turned to look directly at the Velthari counselor. Do I? I thought I was simply discussing the facts of the case. You are implying criticism of council policy. Mordeth clicked angrily. Am I? Tejo asked. I'm simply describing what happened. If you find those descriptions critical, perhaps that says something about the policies themselves. A murmur ran through the chamber. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to the council with such barely contained defiance. Tejo's voice grew stronger as he warmed to his theme. The council also criticizes humanity for providing aid to alien colonies without permission. Again, I find this fascinating. He gestured toward the holographic displays that still showed images of human doctors treating alien patients and human engineers repairing alien infrastructure. We are accused of the crime of healing the sick and feeding the hungry. We are charged with the violation of helping people repair their homes and defenses. We are condemned for the terrible offense of treating other species as equals deserving of respect and assistance. Lee So-min watched from the gallery as more alien representatives began to focus on Tejo's words. She could see the subtle signs of nervousness in some of the council members. They hadn't expected this kind of pushback. I must confess, Tejo said, his diplomatic mask beginning to slip entirely, that I am confused by the council's definition of proper behavior. According to your standards, the proper response to piracy is to file reports and hope for the best. The proper response to suffering is to ignore it unless it affects your own interests. The proper response to injustice is to maintain order above all else. High Counselor Velnara leaned forward in her seat. The human ambassador forgets. His place, my place. Tejo's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. What exactly is humanity's place according to this council? The question hung in the air. Many of the alien representatives exchanged glances. They had grown comfortable with their position. At the top of the galactic hierarchy, they didn't like being questioned about it. Humanity's place, Tejo continued, seems to be as a junior species that should be grateful for council guidance. Our place is to follow rules we had no part in making. Our place is to accept decisions made by governments we cannot vote for or influence. His voice was rising now, carrying clearly to every corner of the vast chamber. Our place is to watch injustice and do nothing. Our place is to see suffering and ignore it. Our place is to accept that might makes right and age makes wisdom. Park Ji-woo felt his pulse quicken. Tejo was abandoning all pretense of diplomatic courtesy now. He was saying things that no one had dared say to the council in centuries. But here's what I find most interesting of all, Tejo said, his eyes blazing as he looked up at the assembled aliens. In all your accusations against humanity, you never once mentioned the results of our actions. He pointed toward the display screens. You never mentioned that the Beltani colonies we helped are now thriving. You never mentioned that the Kithera settlements we aided have expanded their populations for the first time in decades. You never mentioned that the Norathi trading posts we assisted have become successful commercial centers. His voice was full of controlled fury now. You never mentioned that in the 3 months since we eliminated those pirate bases, not a single civilian ship has been attacked in that region. You never mentioned that the shipping lanes we secured have increased trade for dozens of species. You never mentioned that the stability we created has led to new colonies and new prosperity. The chamber was completely silent now. Every alien representative was listening. Even the ones who had been ignoring the proceedings were focused on the human ambassador who dared to challenge their authority. "No," Tejo said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the chamber. "You don't mention the results, because the results prove something you don't want to admit." He paused, letting the tension build. "They prove that your way doesn't work. They prove that your ancient wisdom is just ancient fear. They prove that your commitment to order is really a commitment to keeping things exactly as they are, no matter how much suffering that causes." Dr. Han Yu-jin watched in amazement as her colleague transformed from a diplomatic ambassador into something far more dangerous. A man who had stopped caring about consequences and started caring only about truth. "So yes," Tejo said, his voice now carrying the full weight of his anger. "Humanity refuses to accept our proper place in your galaxy, because our place is not beneath you. Our place is not as your students or your subjects or your junior partners." He looked directly at High Counselor Velnara. "Our place is wherever we choose to stand, and we choose to stand with those who need help against those who would abandon them. We choose to stand with justice against convenience. We choose to stand with change against stagnation." The chamber erupted in outrage, but Tejo wasn't finished. His voice rose above the alien cries and protests. "You want to confine us to our home system? You want to treat us like children who need guidance? Then you better understand exactly what kind of children you're dealing with." The chaos in the council chambers was unlike anything seen in centuries. Alien voices rose in anger, fear, and confusion. Representatives demanded that the human ambassador be silenced. Others called for immediate punishment. A few simply sat, in stunned silence, processing what they had just heard. High Counselor Velnara raised her hand, and gradually the noise died down. Her ancient face was calm, but her eyes showed the cold fury of someone who had been challenged by what she considered a lesser being. "The human ambassador has shown exactly why his species requires guidance," she said, her voice carrying the authority of millennia. "This display of primitive emotion proves that humanity is not ready for true civilization." Kim Tejo stood in the center of it all, no longer bothering to hide his contempt for the assembled council. The diplomatic mask he had worn for 3 years was completely gone now. In its place was something the aliens had never seen before, a human being who refused to be intimidated by their power. "Primitive emotion," Tejo repeated, his voice cutting through the vast chamber like a sword. "You call it primitive emotion when someone refuses to bow to injustice? You call it primitive emotion when someone stands up for the weak and defenseless?" He turned slowly, his gaze sweeping across the thousands of alien representatives. "Then, let me show you what human primitive emotion really looks like." Lee So-min watched from the gallery as her colleague abandoned all pretense of diplomatic language. She had studied alien cultures for over a decade, and she knew that what Tejo was about to do would change the galaxy forever. "You speak of wisdom and experience," Tejo said, his voice now carrying the full force of his anger. "But let me tell you what I see when I look at this council. I see species that have grown fat and lazy on the suffering of those weaker than themselves." The chamber erupted again, but Tejo's voice somehow cut through the noise. "I see civilizations so old and set in their ways that they have forgotten what it means to grow, to change, to become better than what they were yesterday. I see governments that maintain power not through wisdom or justice but through fear and stagnation." Counselor Mordeth rose from his seat, his insectoid features twisted with rage. "This is intolerable. The human must be silenced." "Silenced?" Tejo turned toward the Mordani representative. "Is that your solution to uncomfortable truths? Silence those who dare to question your authority?" He gestured toward the holographic displays that still showed images from the pirate attacks. "You call us barbaric for destroying those pirate bases? Let me tell you about barbarism, Counselor Mordeth. Your own species has strip-mined 17 worlds in the last century, poisoning entire ecosystems and displacing millions of beings. But that's not barbarism, is it? That's just business. The Mordani counselor's multiple arms clicked together in fury, but he had no answer. Teho's attention shifted to the Velthari section. And you, Counselor Veltar, you speak of proper procedures and following established law. But your people have used those same laws to justify enslaving entire species. You call it protective oversight when you take control of primitive worlds. You call it guidance when you steal their resources and crush their cultures. Park Jiwoo felt his heart racing as he watched his friend systematically dismantle the moral authority of the galaxy's most powerful species. This was no longer a diplomatic defense. This was a declaration of war against everything the Council represented. You accuse humanity of being too aggressive? Teho's voice rose higher. The Saurak Empire wiped out 6 intelligent species in the last 1,000 years. Not because those species were hostile, not because they were dangerous, but because they developed faster than light travel without asking permission first. Counselor Zephrun hissed in rage, but several representatives from smaller species were nodding. They remembered those extinct civilizations. You call us unwise for acting without Council approval? Where was the Council when the plague of Kepler 442 was spreading through the outer systems? Humanity sent medical ships and research teams immediately. We worked for 3 years to develop a cure. We saved over 2 billion lives. Teho paused, his gaze finding the section where representatives of the affected species sat. And what did the Council do during those 3 years? You debated. You formed committees. You worried about the trade implications of intervening. You let billions of people die while you discussed proper procedures. Dr. Han Yu-jin saw several alien representatives in that section stand up. The Beltani delegation was the first, followed by the Cathara, then others. Species that had been saved by human intervention were showing their support. High Counselor Velnara's voice cut through the growing commotion. The human ambassador distorts history to serve his argument. Do I? Teho turned to face the ancient Velthari leader directly. Then let's talk about undistorted history. Let's talk about the thermal wars. A hush fell over the chamber. The thermal wars were ancient history, from the early days of the Council's formation. 5,000 years ago, when the Council was young, there was a crisis. The thermal regulation. Systems on dozens of worlds were failing. Billions of beings faced death from freezing or burning. The early Council species had the technology to help, but they demanded payment first. Teho's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the chamber. 17 civilizations went extinct because they couldn't afford Council assistance. 17 entire species died because the Council valued profit over compassion. And from that day forward, the Council has used that lesson to maintain control. Help only comes to those who can pay. Justice only exists for those who can afford it. The silence in the chamber was deafening. These were truths that had been buried for millennia, spoken aloud for the first time in centuries. But humanity doesn't work that way. Teho continued. When we see suffering, we don't ask for payment first. When we see injustice, we don't form committees to study it. When we see evil, we don't debate the proper response for decades. His voice began to rise again, carrying the passion of his entire species. We act. We help. We fight for those who can't fight for themselves, and apparently that makes us dangerous to your precious order. Choi Min-ho watched from the diplomatic section as representatives from dozens of minor species began to stand. These were the forgotten peoples of the galaxy, the ones the Council barely acknowledged, but they were listening to every word. You want to know what humanity's real crime is? Teho asked, his voice now thundering through the chamber. We refuse to accept that civilization means accepting injustice. We refuse to believe that wisdom means ignoring suffering. We refuse to bow to authority that exists only to preserve the power of those who already have it. The chamber was in chaos now, but it was different from before. This wasn't just anger and outrage. This was the sound of an old order beginning to crack under the weight of long-suppressed truth. You speak of humanity learning its place. Teho's voice rose above all other sounds. Very well. Here is humanity's place in this galaxy. He stood, straighter, and somehow his presence seemed to fill the entire vast chamber. We stand with the oppressed against their oppressors. We stand with the weak against the strong. We stand with those who dream of better worlds against those who would chain them to worse ones. His gaze swept across the thousands of alien faces. Stand with growth against stagnation. We stand with justice against convenience. We stand with hope against the bitter certainty that nothing will ever change. The gallery where the minor species sat was now filled with beings on their feet. The sound of their approval was growing louder, echoing off the chamber walls. "You want to confine us to our home system?" Tejo asked, his voice carrying a note of challenge that made even the most powerful council members shift nervously in their seats. "Go ahead and try." The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown at the feet of gods. Kim Tejo stood in the center of the council chambers, no longer a diplomat seeking approval, but a man who had chosen truth over safety, principle over politics. High Counselor, Velnara's ancient face showed the first crack in her composure. In 5,000 years of council rule, no one had ever spoken to the assembled powers with such open defiance. "The human threatens the council," she said, but her voice lacked. "It's earlier certainty. Do I threaten you?" Tejo asked, and for the first time since he began speaking, there was something like amusement in his voice. "One human, standing alone in your great chamber, threatens the combined might of 1,000 species?" He looked around at the vast assembly, and his smile was cold. "If that's true, then you're weaker than I thought." The insult hit the chamber like a physical blow. Representatives leaped to their feet, voices raised in fury. But underneath the anger, there was something else, something that hadn't been present at the beginning of this trial. Fear Park Jiwoo watched from the diplomatic section as the reality of the situation began to dawn on the council members. They had brought humanity here to humiliate and control them. Instead, they had given a human ambassador a platform to expose their failures to the entire galaxy. "But you're right about one thing," Tejo continued, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I don't stand alone, I never have. Because humanity doesn't stand alone." He gestured toward the gallery where representatives of minor species were still standing. "Every world you've abandoned stands with us. Every species you've ignored stands with us. Every civilization you've exploited stands with us." Lee So-min felt tears in her eyes as she watched the transformation taking place in the chamber. What had begun as a trial was becoming something else entirely. It was becoming a reckoning. "The Beltani colonies you left to die from radiation, poisoning. We helped them heal their world. They stand with us." In the gallery, the entire Beltani delegation raised their hands in a gesture of solidarity. "The Kithara settlements you wrote off as too primitive to matter? We shared our agricultural knowledge with them. They stand with us." The bird-like Kithara representatives spread their wings, their traditional sign of respect and alliance. "The Norathi traders you taxed into poverty? We offered them fair deals and honest partnerships. They stand with us." One by one, representatives from dozens of minor species were showing their support. These were peoples that the major council, species barely acknowledged, but together they represented billions of beings across the galaxy. Tejo's voice grew stronger as he saw the effect of his words. "But it's not just the small species, is it? Because some of you remember what it was like before the council became what it is today. Some of you remember when cooperation mattered more than control." His gaze found the section where the Zentaran delegation sat. The Zentarans were an old species, but they had always been independent-minded. The Zentarans remember when their homeworld was dying, and the council demanded 3 systems as payment for assistance. They remember how humanity offered help freely, asking for nothing but friendship in return. Several Zentaran representatives stood, their crystalline features glowing with approval. Dr. Han Yu-jin watched in amazement as more species began to show support. This wasn't just about the minor races anymore. Some of the council's own members were beginning to question their leadership. The Thrakari remember when their colony ships were stranded in dead space for 6 months, while the council debated rescue operations. They remember how human ships arrived within days of receiving their distress call. The reptilian Thrakari delegation rose as one, their scales shifting color in a display of respect. High Counselor Velnara finally found her voice. This is manipulation. The human seeks to turn our own members against us. Against you? Teho asked. Or against the system you represent? Because there's a difference. He turned to address the entire chamber, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. The Council could be a force for good in this galaxy. You have the resources, the knowledge, and the authority to end suffering, to promote justice, to help civilizations grow and prosper together. His voice grew sad, almost disappointed. Instead, you've become exactly what you once fought against. You've become the empire that values order over justice, stability over growth, control over cooperation. Counselor Mordith's clicking voice rose above the murmur of the crowd. The human speaks of cooperation while threatening our authority. I'm not threatening your authority, Teho replied. I'm pointing out that you've already lost it. You just don't know it yet. The chamber fell silent. Even the background sounds of breathing and movement seemed to stop. True authority comes from respect, not fear. It comes from making people's lives better, not keeping them in line. It comes from serving others, not ruling over them. Teho's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow reached every ear. And you lost that kind of authority long ago. He gestured toward the gallery where more and more species were showing their support. Look around you. Half the species in this chamber are standing with humanity right now, not because we threatened them, not because we bribed them, but because we treated them with respect and dignity. Park Jiwoo counted the standing delegations. It was more than half now. It was almost 2/3 of the entire assembly. You want to confine humanity to our home system? Teho asked. You want to cut us off from the galaxy? Go ahead, but understand what that means. His voice began to rise again, building toward a crescendo. It means that every species standing right now will know that the Council's justice is not for them. It means that every world we've helped will understand that cooperation with the Council means abandoning their friends. It means that every civilization watching this trial will learn that the Council fears change more than it values justice. The standing delegations were now the majority. Species after species was rising to show support for humanity's position. You think you're punishing humanity, Teho said, his voice now carrying the full power of prophetic certainty. But you're really just announcing to the galaxy that the Council's age is ending. High Counselor Velnara stood, her ancient frame trembling, with rage. The Council will not be threatened by... The Council will not be anything much longer, Teho interrupted, and his voice carried such absolute conviction that even the High Counselor fell silent. Because the galaxy is watching this trial. Right now, on 1,000 worlds, beings are seeing humanity put on trial for the crime of doing what's right. They're seeing the Council defend a system that values procedure over people, profit over compassion, control over justice. The chamber was completely still now. Everyone understood that they were witnessing something historic. And tomorrow, when the news of this trial spreads across the galaxy, those beings are going to ask themselves a question. They're going to ask, why do we follow a government that punishes those who help the weak and protects those who exploit them? Teho's final words rang through the chamber like the sound of a great bell. The stars belong to all of us. It's time we started acting like it. He turned and walked from the speaking platform, his footsteps echoing in the absolute silence. Behind him, the ancient order of the galaxy began to crumble. As news of Ambassador Teho's speech spread across the galaxy at light speed, the reaction was immediate and dramatic. On dozens of worlds, populations that had suffered under council, indifference rose in rebellion. Species that had been exploited for centuries demanded justice. Colonies that had been abandoned called for help from their human friends. The Council's response fleets found themselves facing not just human ships, but armadas of species they had dismissed and forgotten. The minor races that had stood with humanity in the Great Chamber now stood with them in space. President Yoon Da-hee issued humanity's final statement to the galaxy from Earth's capital. We reject the Council's authority to dictate how we defend our friends and help those in need. We call on all free peoples to join us in building a galaxy based on cooperation, not domination. Within 6 months, the Galactic Council's authority had collapsed. The ancient system of control and exploitation was replaced by something new, a confederation of free worlds working together as equals. And at the center of it all was a simple idea that one human diplomat had dared to speak aloud in the Council's great chamber. The stars belong to all of us. The age of the Council was over. The age of cooperation had begun.